Yes, can you hear me now, Shrikant?
Yes, very clearly. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's a delight to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. It's wonderful. So we have, I think, 20 minutes. So Deepshikha, I'm just going to go into it straight away. Okay.
Of course. I've
So
seen your earlier sessions. You've been rushing through those, so I can imagine. So
I
yes,
always think that
thank you for time.
we should always end a session when the audience wants more rather than when they wish that it was over.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We do the same with this one. Okay. So one thing I want to ask you, it's just a background question, but just a very quick thing. That if you look at, you've been in the PR business for a long time. If you see two, three big phases in it, okay,
Yeah.
what are the big phases that you've been through, that PR has been through?
Yeah,
Because that will be the background for my subsequent questions. Yeah, please.
Absolutely. I actually see sort of maybe 5 phases, Shrikant, that we've been through. And I'll start with, so Genesis BCW has, of course, been around for 30 years. And I'd say there were 5 phases in these 30 years. I've been part of this business for all of those years, I think. So in the beginning, it was the early 90s when agencies like us set up, and we were agencies, but quickly moved to being consultancies. And I'll talk about that journey also. So it was a lot of Indian promoter-led firms which set up business here and started talking about professional and strategic way of looking at public relations, moving away from just press relations to public relations. That was the early phase, right? Then in the early 2000, you had the big .com boom and bust. And that is a time also when PR consultancies started talking about multiple stakeholder communication, where we said, look, it's not just your customer consumer, but you need to start looking at your reputation building across multiple stakeholders.
Correct.
So that conversation started. Then in the late 2000s, a lot of the international big firms came in, including buying out some of the Indian firms.
Correct.
And suddenly India became the place for the large global PR consultancies to come in. Then in the 2010s, early 2010s, we had this whole bit of digital, or should I say social media actually at that time, arriving in our life. So there was I think almost from 2012 to 2016, 17, a lot of us experimenting with how do we grapple with the social media entry. And then of course the pandemic happened, which by itself became a completely different phase. So that's how I look at it, almost like 5 phases of evolution for ourselves in the industry.
That's very, I think it's good for the audience that you recap it. So I'm going to throw a lot of questions at you, okay? One of them, and I love asking this of communication firms as well as brand managers, which is that, digital first is such a catch-all phrase, okay? All right. And it means, I mean, obviously there's authenticity because people do go digital when they look for content, all right? But what does it, so digital first in marketing, everybody says it. What specifically does it mean, on a day-to-day basis? What does it mean for the PR business?
Yeah, so I think if you come from what is the real role of public relation consultancy, right? It's to protect the reputation, to tell the stories and the narratives on behalf of an organization or a brand to their different stakeholders. Right. So if you're a stakeholder of a brand or a company, Shrikant, every morning, what is the first thing you pick up?
Mobile phone.
Mobile phone. So your WhatsApp, right? And if you're one of those, you'll quickly get onto your Twitter feed, you'll get onto your Facebook feed, and then you'll go further to go into your, whichever is your preferred publication online feed. Now, if that is what is happening to our audience, first digital, then they will come to the print publication. And I think a lot of people even stopped subscribing to newspapers at home today. So how do we deal with that audience? And which is why we have to start thinking of our campaign first digital. If the first thing you will pick up, and it will be WhatsApp, it will be Twitter, it will be Facebook,
but has it happened in the PR, in the ops groups? Has it really happened?
Yeah. And this is where I think the pandemic really forced it. So, when I was telling you about the phases from 2012 to 2016, a lot of us were flirting around with what to do with the social media. But in the pandemic, we were forced to change to it very, very quickly. So today, when I'm looking at putting together an integrated strategy, and I know you understand what I mean by integrated strategy,
Yeah.
what are the mediums that I want to put out that communication through? So while yes, there will always be the traditional print mediums, what we call earned media, then there will also be a lot of owned media, which is the company's website and the
Correct.
company's channels and so on. Then I will do what is the shared media, which is social media, right? So I have to mandatory look at all of these elements when I start thinking about, so how do I get my message out? And
Okay.
that is the digital first. And sometimes, and
But
if
are
I
you
just add
satisfied?
here,
Are you satisfied with the orientation towards digital now in your own company? I mean, are you
yes,
getting as much
I'll
out
tell
of
you.
digital as you could?
It's a very interesting question because digital is changing so fast and every day. You can never be satisfied, and never can you sit back and say, oh, we've mastered this, we've got this going,
Okay.
because the medium itself is evolving. I mean, now you have Meta, then you have AI, and what do
Yeah.
you do with that? So you have to continue to keep pushing to stay a step ahead, and that's the only way.
So that brings me to my next question, which is, in one of your interviews, I was seeing that I think in more than one, you've underlined the importance of data analytics in the PR business. Okay. But the fact is, traditionally, PR firms um, are not
Weird.
let's say a hive of data analysts, right? They're
Yeah.
not, right? So
Yeah.
how do you culturally, how do you deal with it?
Yeah. So
And also
it
there
is
is this thing of data overload, like analysis paralysis. There's so much data coming out of everybody's ears that finally you have a sense of
yes.
what is important, what is not important. So how do you do that?
Absolutely. So one of the things we have to do aggressively in our firm, Shrikant, is train our people every day on what to do with that data. One is first, how do you get the data? So you can't just dump data onto our
Correct.
people, right? And you have to have, so we have a team called the newsroom team, which we
Correct.
started actually 6-7 years back because of
Okay.
exactly the point you made. What do you do with all this data? So one, where do you go to get the relevant data? Most
Right.
important, what are the tools you use to then make some sense of that data? The good news is there's enough and more tools available to you to be able to make some sense of that data today, and then take that data and give it to our teams to
This
say
is data on
now
this is data on social media, or it could be on website,
everything.
news
It
websites,
could
anywhere.
be news websites, so it could be social media listening tools and data tools. It could be consumer knowledge and consumer needs and insights tools. So
Okay.
and we are part of WPP, so we have access to a lot of these
Yeah.
tools and data, right? So when we take these and give it to our teams to say, okay, now look at these data from an insights point of view. And I think that's the difference. Dumping data onto your people and say, now figure it out, versus putting it into streamlined, insight led, I'd say actionable data insights. Then people know what to do with that data,
Okay.
and they use it to actually put together their thinking, their planning, and their strategy for the clients. And that's the big difference. So you have to invest in the right kind of tools to be able to decipher
You
and
have to
make
be able
sense
to
of data.
get the right kind of people. And I think that one of the issues is
Yeah,
that would really good data executives
analysts.
would they join PR firms, because they may they may want to go to a large specialized, maybe a tech firm, isn't it? So I think
Yeah,
that would
yeah,
be better,
yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So
And this is where you use the power of partners and teams. You don't have to hire them all in-house also, Shrikant. You get
yeah,
the right
that's true.
partners
That's true.
and vendors to be able to work with you. So you
Yeah,
use the best of your ecosystem. And I
yeah.
think that's an art itself.
An unrelated question. I think, was it earlier this year or late last year, your firm started offering a service around corporate social purpose, right? Uh,
Right.
and I gather you're very passionate about that. But normally there are CSR firms which guide corporates on these matters. So, I mean, how does BCW fit in? If they want to,
Yeah.
I mean, are you doing the same thing that the CSR firms are doing? Are you doing something else? Could you just explain?
I want to just step back a little, Shrikant. So our founder, Prema Sagar,
Yeah.
always believed in doing good, and CSR was at the heart. We also have a foundation called the Genesis Foundation. So
Yes,
it was, in our psyche and our built in that whatever we do, we have to do to give back to the community, right? And we started offering CSR in partnership with a firm called White Kettle, which is a CSR expert. So to your point, we create partnerships to bring in the best for our
Okay,
clients,
that's
right?
great. Makes sense.
So I already connect with the client, have their trust and their engagement, and then I bring in the right partner. So we used to do that on CSR. But then with the whole corporate social purpose piece coming in, where purpose sits much above CSR. So if I were to just put it into a visual representation for you, there is CSR, 2% today. Now you have ESG, which has become a little broader, environment, social, and governance. And then purpose sits on top of this. So we are saying it's not enough to only do CSR and somehow get that 2% through, whether it's through philanthropy or doing a particular program. We are saying you have to look at ESG because that's where companies are going to be measured, are already being measured. I mean, the BRSR norms that have been introduced, and SEBI is very clear that companies have to adhere to those. And then you have this larger purpose, which is for your customers, your employees, your business partners, for government. So you have to be a company which must be clear, why am I doing what am I doing? And how will I make a difference in the lives of my people?
Okay, may I interrupt you? See, so the CSR thing at least is very clear. It's 2%. It's based on a statistical fact, right? You do so much, you have to give so much. But when it comes to corporate purpose, there's a lot of skepticism, and I must say I'm one of them. Okay, because corporates were set up to make profit. Okay, that is the reason why businesses are formed. Finally, it's for profit, right? For startups, it may be revenue in the first place. Finally, when there's a winter, it comes back to profits, right? So there's this view that a lot of the corporates are forced into saying, I have a purpose. And so then they come up with a purpose, which they are not honest about, and there's this term called purpose washing. You just make up a purpose, right? So what is your point of view on that? I know we are straying a little away from PR, but I mean, would you like just briefly respond to that?
I want to first correct you, we're not straying away from PR. If you do not believe and don't have purpose at the heart of your organization, and you're doing purpose washing, you're going to get a lot of backlash, which will affect your reputation.
On social media, specifically?
On social media, on every way of your being connecting with your audiences, right? And if PR is about protecting your reputation, all the more reason you have to make sure that if you bring in purpose into your organization, you are living by it. It has to be something authentic. It has to be rooted in the values of the work you do every day. And you're right, it's not easy. It's not easy enough to say, okay, I have a statement and this is my purpose statement and that's it. I'm going to just stick it up on my websites or put it up on some external communication. You have to do a lot of work to internalize it. The kind of products you create have to link back to it. The engagements that you do, the kind of work that you do has to link back to it. And that's exactly why we started this journey on putting this corporate social purpose, because we believe a lot of clients, a lot of companies need that hand holding. They have the right intentions, Shrikant, but they need somebody to work with them, to handhold and guide them. And I'm happy to say, when we put this together, and I remember sharing it with we have at WPP, we had the CEO, it's Exco, and I shared this whole thought process with them. Every one of my CEO compatriots from different disciplines, all were so excited to say, how can we do this together?
And
whether it's creative,
they probably have clients who are seeking a purpose. So I'm sure.
Possibly, right? And we all work with similar kind of clients. So,
couple of questions quickly. We just have 3 minutes.
Sure,
One is that, there's a corporate purpose, okay? But brands by themselves can also have their own purpose, right?
Yeah.
And for example, life is a very good example. I mean, one of the cases where I've been very convinced, they just had a sense of clean hands, good health. It's just, and it fits. It just fits,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not a premium soap. It's available everywhere. How do you mesh a corporate purpose with the purpose of brands? And the brands may be running in different directions, right? Dove may be
Yeah.
about intensity, something is about something else, and there's Johnson and Johnson. How do you fit this corporate and brand purpose?
So there is a larger corporate purpose that Unilever has, which is around
Right.
sustainability, right? And they make a lot of effort to ensure that every brand also addresses that corporate purpose. So to your point, yes, wash hands actually turns into healthier lives, because
Correct.
they talk about taking away germs, right? Killing germs, which make healthier lives, especially for children and for so when you're
But
eating,
I mean, in the case
before
of
you eat.
in the case of
Yeah.
Lifebuoy, it just fits. But if you have cosmetics, I mean, it's a little harder
No,
to.
no.
It's
Yeah.
it's a tough
Cosmetics,
one.
I'll tell you. So we work with a company which has a purpose, which is create a beauty that moves the world. And they actually go into looking at product formulation, which is not harmful to the environment,
Okay.
packaging, which is recyclable, their manufacturing operations, which are carbon neutral.
All right.
So there are various things you would do which ladder back to that corporate purpose. So while brands have that purpose, they need to ladder back to the larger corporate purpose also. So it is a architecture
Okay.
which has to be put together.
An unrelated question,
Yeah.
many CEOs, I mean, Anand Mahindra is a classic case. I mean, the kind of following he has on social media is so good, right? And there are others as well. And there are other CEOs, they're just poor guys, poor women. They're just tongue-tied, right? They're not good on social media. They may get somebody to do something for them, but they're never going to be popular beyond a point. They're not built like that, right? What do you advise people like this? And because on the one hand, we say you must be authentic. The authentic me is I'm tongue-tied, That's the authentic me. That's not going to help you. So what do you do?
Yeah.
What do you advise them?
Yeah. So yes, it's about finding what they're most comfortable with. While they may be tongue-tied because it's, they suddenly think it's an audience I'm speaking to and what am I going to say? But if you're a CEO, you've obviously got some interesting stories to tell. You haven't become the leader of an organization by being tongue-tied, Shrikant, right? You have, right? You've talked about your business. You have lovely anecdotes about the people you have worked with, how you have mentored other people, how you've gone through certain challenges of the business and how you've come out stronger. So these stories obviously always exist. So we have to just work with the leader to handhold them, to help them, I'd say, clean up some of that storytelling, right? So that it becomes more comfortable for them to use that on social media. And once you start, it's the effort of just kickstarting that process. And once you start and you find the conversation and the reaction, then it picks up from there. Yeah.
Okay, so we've run out of time, but I have one question for you,
Okay.
which is that I've found that a lot of, I mean, I think it's public knowledge that many people from the many executives and good executives from PR firms have ended up going on the client side, especially I think the startups have seduced them in the largest measure, perhaps. Do you think it's going to get worse before it gets better, or is this something you have to live with?
It's a growing industry, Shrikant. If you ask me,
which one, yours or theirs?
It doesn't matter. For me, it's the whole industry.
Right.
Because if they're going there, they're becoming my clients. I'm actually very delighted if clients are getting on board good, strong communication professionals, because it makes my life easier to be able to engage with somebody who understands what I do.
That's a very, very good way of looking at it. Yeah.
Right. So the industry is actually benefiting. We as a firm have created many, many, many PR professionals over the last 30 years, and you can imagine.
Right.
And at one point we used to feel, oh, people are going away. But then I said, that's fine. We are putting out some very good, strong, intelligent, knowledgeable, experienced people who are benefiting the growth of this industry.
Right.
So I am happy to continue to be in the learning school of PR. No
Wonderful.
problem.
Very good. I think that's a good note on which to end this conversation. Thank you, Deepshikha. I think you've been candid, and it's been a very interesting conversation. Thank you very much.
A pleasure.
Audience,
Thanks
I hope
so
you enjoyed
much.
it too. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.